A lot of new NATO tanks have been presented recently at the Eurosatory military exhibition in France, and we got to see a lot of innovations and changes to the designs they have presented last time. Some good changes and some not so much. But we also got to see quite a lot of new stuff as well. At the last Eurosatory, it was probably the Rheinmetall's Kf-51 Panther that got the most attention. And don't worry, I will cover it in this video as well. But I first want to talk about what I believe is this year's star of the show, the EMBT with its Ascalon gun. But before we go any further, a quick word from today's sponsor, World of Tanks. World of Tanks is a free online game. It features a huge arsenal of over 800 light, medium and heavy tanks, tank destroyers and artillery, allowing you to play the game however you want. Whether you go in guns blazing, ambush your opponents with sneaky tactics, or take them out from afar, there is always a new way to play the game. Historical accuracy and inspiration means authentic models and vehicle characteristics that make you feel like a real tank commander taking part in a furious armored offensive. Earn experience, modify and upgrade your tank, create a steel beast ready for any challenge. The game is completely free and accessible to anyone, so whether you're a novice or a pro, you can jump in and experience the same thrill as 100 million players who share your passion. And if you follow the link in the description, you get special rewards. New players receive Cromwell B Tier 6 Premium Tank, 250,000 credits and 7 days of premium access. That's not all, you will also receive 3 rental tanks for 10 battles each, Tiger 131, T78 and Type 64. Existing players also get rewards for following the link. You get 3 days of premium access, 7-day rental of a premium tank Centurion Mk5/1 RAAC with crew trained to 100% for 10 battles, or 100,000 credit compensation if you already own the tank, as well as a 2D Style Camouflage bargain, the checkered camo that will turn your tank into a true motley crew. So what are you waiting for? The game is completely free, just follow the link in the description and join today. The KNDS, the joint between French Nexter and the German Krauss-Maffei, presented 3 quite interesting tanks. First and by far the most interesting is the EMBT with an unmanned turret. This tank uses EMBT chassis, a tank presented in the last expo, with a new unmanned turret with the 140mm Ascalon main gun. The turret being named ADT-140, which stands for Ascalon Demonstrator Turret. This tank features an autoloader with 22 rounds. Which might not appear as much, but this is comparable to the T72 for example, which also has 22 rounds in the autoloader. The crew of this tank is composed of 3 crew members, which is a shift from previous designs presented last time, who all featured 4 crew members despite having an autoloader. This definitely had to be done to preserve the space inside the tank, since the turret is no longer manned, the space for the crew becomes very limited. But what somewhat allowed this is the fact that the new electronics, coupled with AI improvements, will lift off the burden from the crew and will essentially be replacing the 4th crew member. The turret is quite interesting. What I like a lot about it is that it is actually protected. You probably know I have criticized the turret of T14 Armata recently for the lack of protection, and I did because this is something that should be standard if the unmanned turrets should become the norm. The level of protection is said to be still negotiated, but the turret does feature active, passive, and reactive elements for protection. Reactive and passive probably include composite armors and explosive or non-explosive reactive armor. As for the active protection system, they said they are looking at an active protection system which would protect the tank from rockets, missiles, and kinetic energy munitions, as well as any form of top attack munitions. If you think that is great, wait till you hear this. We all know that the drones have become the biggest problem for the tanks right now, so how did they solve this issue on this tank? Well, the turret is equipped with a remote weapon station with a 30mm autocannon which fires 30mm airburst projectiles. This station is linked to radars optimized for drone detection, as well as special optronic sensors for drones, which means that the tank can detect and engage any drones with the airburst munition, giving the much needed protection against the current biggest threat for the tanks on the battlefield. Since the crew is now sitting lower in the tank, they said that they want to integrate quality cameras with the quality and latency close to the human eye, with the possibility to provide the bird's eye view system, probably with the help of some onboard drones. Now, before I talk about the gun itself, I have to talk about the second tank that they presented, the Leclerc Evolution. The Leclerc Evolution features a regular manned turret, and despite having an autoloader, has 4 crew members. This tank overall is very similar to the first EMBT, even visually. This tank is meant as a sort of a stopgap between the already existing tanks and the future MGCS, which is planned to be fielded by 2040. It is meant to combine already existing technology and new technology. The turret features some of the improvements that we saw on the EMBT, like the remote weapon station for taking out drones. But the most interesting aspect is definitely the gun. In the pictures I have shown, you have probably seen the big Ascalon 120 written on the gun. Well, this tank features a 120mm variant of the 140mm Ascalon, and it is not just a downsized gun, it is much more than that. The Ascalon 120 is made to be able to fire the already existing NATO ammunition, but also has increased pressure like the new L55A1, allowing it to fire even the new APF-SDS projectiles like the DM73. On top of that, it is also made to fire new ammunition developed specifically for it. Both Ascalon 120 and 140 are made to fire the new telescoped, or rather semi-telescoped ammunition, which basically means most of the projectile is surrounded by the propellant and the casing, allowing for the shorter overall length, but also allowing for longer APF-SDS penetrators to be developed. And it is just what they are doing right now. The new 120mm APF-SDS developed for Ascalon is said to have a 40% increase in performance, while the 140mm one is said to have 70% increase in performance when compared to the already existing projectiles. And the best part about the 120mm Ascalon is that it can easily be replaced by the 140mm. The only difference between the 120mm and the 140mm guns are the barrels. The breech and everything else remains the same, including the autoloader in the tank. This is possible because the breech of the 120mm gun is already made to be able to sustain the fire of the 140mm variant, and the ammunition of the 140mm is the same in the case diameter as the 120mm, probably since the 120mm is more tapered, meaning that the ammunition from both guns fits inside the same autoloader and breech. So if any customer chooses the 120mm variant at first because they have a lot of 120mm ammunition laying around, they can easily replace all the guns for their 140mm variants by just ordering new barrels. This is a really nice feature, and I can see a lot of countries actually being interested in this. One feature I don't really like about all these new vehicles is that for some reason they are trying to integrate loitering munition launchers as a replacement for ammo racks, heavily reducing ammo capacity in order to fit a couple of loitering munition pieces. They haven't done it on the unmanned turret, but it is a feature on the Leclerc and other tanks presented at the expo. In my opinion, it would be better to have external launchers for loitering munition, unironically something like the ATGM launchers on the latest North Korean tank. I personally don't see why anyone would reduce the ammo capacity of their tank in half, as it would severely impact the amount and the types of ammunition the tank could carry. The third vehicle KNDS presented was the Leopard 2 ARC 3.0. Weird name, I know. This is another tank with an unmanned turret, which utilizes a basketless turret based on the turret of the tracked Boxer we got to see on the last Eurosatory. This basketless turret allows for the placement of the crew directly under the turret, and just like with the EMBT, the number of the crew members in this tank is 3. The chassis is a Leopard 2 chassis but modified. The height of the hull has been increased in the middle to allow for better comfort of the crew, which now sit there. The turret doesn't appear to have as good of a protection as the EMBT, and the gun is, for some reason, pretty exposed, leaving it pretty vulnerable from even side hits, especially from autocannons. Flashback to Armata turret. They said that the turret itself can withstand a hit from a 57mm gun, but that is obviously in the areas with the composite armor. There is no way that the exposed areas of the gun would be able to sustain such a hit. It features Trophy active protection system and the 30mm remote weapon station, where they also mention some counter-drone capabilities, but they do not say to what extent and in what way such a capability is provided by the weapon station. No mention of radars to detect drones or anything. They said that the trophy system might be optimized in the future against drones, which could indicate that the tank might only rely on visual detection to counter enemy drones, for now at least. The hull has been up-armored and the upper front plate, sides, and entire frontal arc with X protection, including what appear to be explosive reactive armor tiles of unknown origin and performance. There is also an obvious lack of periscopes on the tank, which is rather surprising since we have seen every other tank still retain periscopes, even just as backup. Not that big of a deal I guess, but it should be mentioned nevertheless. The gun can be replaced with any gun the customer wants. Any 120mm NATO gun and even the 130mm Rheinmetall and 140mm Ascalon can be installed in the turret, which is one of the good things about this vehicle. The autoloader is also said to be able to fire 3 rounds per 10 seconds, meaning it has an insane rate of fire of 18 rounds per minute. But overall, I'm not personally a great fan of this tank. it doesn't really bring anything groundbreaking to the table. The not so great drone protection and the seemingly poor protection of the turret leave a lot to be desired. It does appear as a cheaper variant of an unmanned turret tank someone might be interested in the future, but besides that, there isn't really anything special about it. Next vehicle presented was from Rheinmetall, and it is a further evolution of the now famous KF-51 Panther, the KF-51U. Just like the Leopard 2 ARC and the new EMBT, the tank features an unmanned turret, called Concept Uncrewed Turret, or CUT for short. The tank utilizes a modified Leopard 2 chassis, where all 3 crew members sit in front of the turret and not under it like in the Leopard 2 ARC. The turret features the same autoloader as seen on the regular KF-51, as well as the 130mm Rheinmetall gun. The protection levels have not been disclosed, but they said that the turret does have some protection, but that the levels of protection will depend on the customer. This is also good because, well, just because the turret is unmanned doesn't mean it should have absolutely no protection. That being said, they don't save much weight with it. Only 10 to 20% of weight is saved compared to the manned turret, which isn't a whole lot. The turret also features Iron Fist hard kill-like protection system for extra protection. The remote weapon station for the commander appears to be quite decent. Now it is integrated into the commander's panoramic sight, which is something a lot of NATO tanks lack, usually having a separate sight for the remote weapon station as well as controls, which not only means that the sighting system won't be as good as the one of the CITV, but also increases the load on the commander. Having them integrated into one system is much better in my opinion. The weapon in question is a 3-barreled 7.62 machine gun, and the station has a radar for drone detection, meaning it can be utilized in the defense against FPV drones. Although probably not as effective as 30mm airburst of the EMBT, it is still good enough feature to have on a tank. The sides of the hull appear to have the Strike Shield hybrid protection mounted on them. This is basically a passive armor add-on with an integrated hard kill system into it. They are again offering the replacement of half of the ammo in the turret with loitering munition, and again, I'm honestly not a fan of that. Overall, this tank seems to be pretty decent, especially when it comes to the protection. The firepower is nothing new, as we have seen the 130mm gun on the KF-51 last time. Speaking of the old KF-51, in December of 2023, Hungary signed a contract with Rheinmetall to bring the KF-51 to production maturity. With a small catch, it won't be armed with the 130mm gun, but the 120mm L55A1 currently being installed on Leopard 2A7 and 2A8 tanks. This downgraded model is called KF-51 Evo, but they say that if the customer ever chooses to switch to the 130mm down the line, it would be done easily, but they did not provide the details. KF-51 Evo was probably chosen by Hungary because it is simply not that expensive. The tank is mostly just a turret, which can be installed on already existing Leopard 2 hull, and I mean, that is literally what Rheinmetall has been doing. This year, they presented it on a Leopard 2A4 hull, which has not been repainted, probably to demonstrate that it in fact can be used on the old hulls, and as such, modern MBTs can be acquired much faster and cheaper than if they were to buy completely new tanks. Overall, the new EMBT with its Ascalon gun and the KF-51U appear to be most promising of the bunch. But keep in mind, all these tanks are mostly just tech demonstrators and are probably not fully developed yet, and mostly serve as a form of a stopgap before the MGCS comes along. It will probably take years for them to be fully developed in the first place, yet alone be adopted into service, if they ever will be. It is possible that only some of the features presented on them will be adopted for some already existing tanks, most likely some of those anti-drone remote weapon station systems, seeing as to how big of a race the drones have become. That would be all. If you like my content, you can support me on Patreon. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video. Have a nice day.